Chapter 30. Sebastian Recruiting. A few days ago. Sebastian had been fainting sleep for a few hours, and when things finally settled down, he got up and undid the chains on his wrist and ankle quietly. He knows that Anelia will choose Bethany over him any day, as she thought Bethany will be easier to control. Strike one, idiots. Sebastian placed the chains away quietly and stood up. He looked around the room for any way out. The door is out of the option since he doesn't have a key. He walked around to see if there's any hole or anything, but there's nothing. Sebastian sighed as he sat down. They didn't really thought about how he should escape. He drummed his fingers on the dirty tile, then he paused. Sebastian frowned as he got onto his knees. He knocked on the tile again, then at the one beside it. He smirked. The sound came out different. The first one was airy and sounded empty, while the latter's sound came out more firm and loud. Maybe. Sebastian got up and walked over to his bed and took out a spoon he hid previously and went back to the spot. He knocked on the tiles again to make sure he was at the right spot before he digged the spoon to the sides of the tile. It only took him a minute before the tile moved up. Sebastian placed the spoon beside him and lifted up the tile gently as he sighed as he thought about going out into the cold night without it. Sebastian shrugged it off and placed it on his bed. He paused. Then he decided to make his bed to make it seem like there's a person in it. The guards won't know the difference since they had already placed him in a cell where someone had already escaped before. Sebastian sighed as he looked at the hole in the darkness following it.
Well, here goes nothing.
And he jumped in. Sebastian coughed as soon as he's in. The dirt flew up when he landed, and it caused a fog of dirt. He swiped the dirt away a few times before he can finally see past the dirt. Not that he can see much, since the only light came from the hole above him that wasn't producing much light to begin with.
Charles, a little help here? Copy that.
With that, Sebastian can see again with the help of his werewolf side's enhanced vision. Who needs tech when you're a werewolf? Sebastian started trekking with bended back since the hole was quite small. After a few minutes of tracking, he finally saw a trickle of light. He followed the light and he was met with a dead end.
The hell?
He inspected the wall or something that's blocking his way out with a frown. He knocked on the door and the sound that came out was airy as well. He tried pushing and the wall moved a bit. Sebastian huffed. He dug his heels into the dirt and pushed. Slowly the wall started moving until it opened and he was out. The hole led him straight into the woods and, coincidence much? The person who dug this hole must be very intelligent and had thought this true to know where to dig that'll lead him to the woods and without much noise. The lack of guards is a plus, too. And that's strike 3. They should have a better rotation of guards. How confident is that king? Sebastian shook his head. He turned around and pushed the wall back to its original place, mark it with a small scratch. After that, he's off. Sebastian started trekking through the woods to find any hybrids that came out of hiding, but none. When he was sure this area doesn't have anything, he changed area. After 1 hour without any fruit, Sebastian was tempted to quit, but then he heard a growl. He stiffened and turned his head around. When he checked that the sound wasn't from around him, he climbed onto a tree. With that, he started jumping tree to tree to find that growl. It could be a hybrid. After 10 trees and several turns, he landed on a tree where a girl was stood below. The area the girl was standing in was shady and the leaves was hiding her, so she was clearly hiding. Sebastian looked up, but he can't see anything, so he climbed up higher and saw what made the girl go into hiding. There, a few miles away, was a malfunction hybrid. How the hell is one of them out? Sebastian climbed down the tree, but still above the girl, to observe her. She was holding a bow and arrow, and it was equipped. She was aiming it at the malfunction hybrid, so it's either she knows what that thing is, or she had mistaken it as a wolf or something. Sebastian jumped down silently and stopped the girl before she could release it. The girl almost screamed, but Sebastian quickly covered her mouth with his hand. Sebastian placed his index finger over his lips, and when the girl nodded, he lowered his hand. Sebastian reached out his hand. The girl got his message and placed the bow and arrow in his hands. Sebastian took aim and let the arrow fly. The malfunction hybrid was facing sideways, so the arrow went cleanly through its brain. Sebastian turned around to look at the girl, who was staring at him in awe. "How do you do that?" Sebastian smirked.
With lots of practice.
But then there was another growl behind them. Sebastian quickly pulled the girl behind him and readied his bow and arrow. Then, to his surprise, the girl squealed and ran to the wolf. The wolf then nuzzled the girl as she hugged it with her life. The wolf looked up again and growled at him. "Who are you?"
I'm Sebastian Lloyd.
The wolf was shocked. "You understand me?" Sebastian nodded, then he decided to fuck it.
I'm the prince of the Red Wolf Pack, and I'm one of the prophecy children.
The wolf's eyes widened before it nudged its head to the other direction. "Follow me." They trekked with the girl on the wolf's back. After a while, they reached a cottage. They entered, and the wolf walked further back into the house after placing the girl on the couch. After a while, a woman with black silky hair and hazel eyes walked out and smiled. "You have no idea how long I was finding you." Sebastian's brow furrowed.
Are you a hybrid?
The woman shook her head. Then she turned her head to the side. Sebastian followed her gaze and landed on the girl. "I'm only someone who's trying to protect one." Sebastian nodded as the woman called the girl over. "This is Clarissa. She's born with a werewolf mom and a vampire dad. Sweetie, introduce yourself." The girl smiled. "My name is Clarissa Jones. I'm 7 and I can turn into a wolf."
Yeah, don't introduce that last line to people.
The woman grimaced at that. "I'm trying to stop her from doing it." Sebastian then looked around.
I'm sorry, but where's her father?
The woman looked at her daughter sadly. "My mate's dead. The higher-up found out and executed him on the spot." Sebastian was shocked, but he nodded.
I'm sorry for your loss.
The woman waved back weakly. "That was before Clarissa was even born, so I know how to bear with it. I escaped from our home as quick as possible with Clarissa in my stomach and ran. I found this cottage and have been safe since." Sebastian nodded.
So you were looking for me?
The woman nodded. "I sneaked into the castle on that day and heard what that boy said. Is it true? Was he your cousin?" Sebastian nodded.
Yes, he is.
The woman furrowed her brows.
He's alive.
Sebastian said, then he started explaining parts of the plan to her. The woman hummed and nodded. "I know a few hybrids, and I know they're willing to fight for their rights. It's best that it's their time to hunt instead of being hunted. But the problem is that I could count them with just one hand. Sebastian smirked.
It's fine, as long as there's more hybrids out there. It's fine.
The woman nodded, and they started planning on how to transfer the other hybrids here without the guards knowing. Then, when it was time to go, Sebastian concluded.
I'm not sure how they'll arrive, but for sure they'll all gather here. I'll come by every day at this time.
The woman hummed. What if you don't? Sebastian smiled grimly.
Then the war has already begun.
And if that day has finally arrived?
Then you must go to my brother's home, the Red Wolf Pack's palace.
The woman nodded solemnly. Sebastian smiled.
Remember, that's where the war will be if you choose to fight.
Before Sebastian was out of the door, the woman called out. My name's Yuna. Thanks for asking. Sebastian laughed as he closed the door behind him. He can't believe he forgot to ask for her name. Sebastian shook his head and walked away. True to his word, Sebastian came every day for the past days, and more hybrids started gathering at the place. Sebastian smiled at his success in completing the mission. All is going well. Present time. Sebastian walked over to the tile, and as about to lift it up again before he started hearing footsteps. He quickly pushed it back and laid in his bed. Just then, the door opened and a foot kicked him on the calf. Get up, we're going. Sebastian sat up and looked straight into a smirking Anelia's eyes without any emotion. Sebastian stood up and followed her out of the cell and into a big hall. Sebastian locked eyes with Bethany and frowned. Looks like the war is starting.